So we now move on to our digital sustainability technology panel discussion. Before we launch Slido, we are going to have an opportunity for first Lee Barrett from Curtins, and then Brian Murphy from the Green Building Calculator to just give you a quick overview of what they are doing, some of the things they're doing in the sustainability space, before the two of them and Johanna join me online, and we will run through the questions on Slido. So Lee, if you would like to grab the screen.
Excellent. Yeah, so just to quickly introduce myself, I'm Lee Barnett. I'm Curtins Digital Delivery Manager. I've worked there for 6 years, and I'm passionate about BIM technology and just generally improving workflows. And I'm just going to talk about what Curtins have been doing from a sustainability perspective with technology and just general company ambitions. So we're structural and general just engineering consultants with 7 key specialisms, 350 members of staff, passionate about BIM, holding BSI Kite Mark and won numerous BIM awards at the event up in Newcastle. So Curtins and sustainability then. 2020 was a strategic strategy to kind of reduce Curtins' carbon impact. The main thing we wanted to do was build awareness within the industry, really get the conversation talking. We wanted to measure and record carbon on each one of the projects that we deliver. And what we thought was key was including this information on our drawings and models, because we thought that would have the most impact. We're quite lucky as an organisation that the only materials we specify are concrete, timber, steel and masonry. So we started off with simple beginnings with just a simple spreadsheet, being able to quickly calculate the embodied carbon of a project, and this spreadsheet is still used to this day. But in terms of customizing Revit, etc., we utilize Revit as a tool on a daily basis, and I've been heavily involved in customizing this within the business. We've put embedded data, intelligent families. We've made sure, just obviously this is a BIM conference, we've classified each one of our elements, and this is what's kind of key to our sustainability tool. We then started dovetailing all these bespoke components with kind of custom workflows. We've had a developer in-house for a number of years, so actually turbocharging Revit. So we came up with a carbon tool for Revit. We went out to the market and we saw what was out there, but we wanted to hit the masses within our business, and we felt strongly that we had the capability to do that. So we wanted to give our teams the ability to calculate embodied carbon within all our models. We used the Uniclass system as a way of driving the carbon value assignment. It helps gauge a little bit more accuracy from that respect. We're able to provide a heat map for concentrated elements, and then obviously we've got this informative stamp as our Revit splash screen telling the end user how much carbon was in that actual model. So I've just got a quick 1-minute video. So the only input from our users is essentially the gross floor area of the building. We're not actually able to calculate that from Revit, as there's multiple ways of modeling a floor. We're then able to determine between new and existing elements of the building. We can generate a heat map of the elements where the concentrated carbon elements are. We can export a table to CSV file for further investigation. And they're able to kind of identify and break down each of the elements and change the values based on the different type of products that they are. So future development for us is to capture carbon on all our projects going forward. We're now trying to create a central database up in the cloud to record all this useful information, and we obviously want to make informed decisions as a business going forward to really drive the carbon reduction of our projects and learn from our past mistakes. So just kind of closing statement from myself. We see technology being able to play a big part in reducing carbon. Conversations around carbon reduction should be taking place on every project. It just needs to become second nature. And then like BIM, the government mandate is going to aid and help driving momentum within the industry. It should be talked about on every project going. So that's how we feel, and that's our tool. And I hope any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. Okay, over to you, Brian, then for a quick overview of the Green Building Calculator.
Okay, so Green Building Calculator version 2. Version 1 was out in June last year. Hopefully version 2 is out by June this year. These are just a few glimpses at a couple of posters that I produced for the occasional award scheme, and the website greenbuildingcalculator.uk. So we all need to count carbon, and I'm actually focusing on small practices who, particularly architectural practices, but anybody else who needs it, who haven't got the money to spend on vast software that has been demonstrated so far. So 12 months and 2 lockdowns later, I've got version 2, which is virtually ready to go, and we've got PowerPoint presentations, and the Excel calculator version 1 is already available on the calculator website, but that will be replaced shortly. So I've wanted to create a design and decision tool. It's not specifically LCA, but it does do LCA as well. I want to help clients get what they want and stop green projects being turned violet, to help avoid the race to the bottom, to practice well-informed value engineering and not cost cutting of individual components, which is what happens most of the time. I've got the ability to choose between regulation minimum and best practice tools and campaigns. The calculator does embodied energy and embodied carbon in the whole building, all of the components. It's going out into the landscape as well, and possibly some kind of small scale infrastructure for residential estates and the like. But it does interior furniture, fittings, services, and the like. So it's trying to be very comprehensive, whereas there are many other tools on the market that are very kind of individual consultant focused. So also the cost of the materials, the energy in use, and the in-use carbon as well, just by choosing your fuel, calculating the cost of the chosen fuel, and then we have the ability to compare the targets with the figures that you've actually achieved. So it's going to give you a warning if you haven't met the targets that you've set yourself. And the method, it's just a simple Excel spreadsheet. So it's familiar, it's easy, it's consistent, and it's comprehensive. It already has all of the building elements already assembled. All you've got to do is choose the materials, choose the products, and then it does all the rest. And it's using simple open source principles so that this can be spread more widely, perhaps. It's going to be rich in product and material data sets. It already has some, but it needs to have more. The plan is that the way we collect data from manufacturers is that we understand the way the manufacturer intended these products to be used, and then we use the spreadsheet functions to make sure that you can't misuse them. They only offer the materials that go into particular cells of the calculator. And so it's all part of the golden thread of trying to kind of make sure everything's under control and making sensible decisions. So we have the ready-made building elements, all of the components to populate with materials or product choices. Making the choice automatically populates all the cells. And we can also identify whether something's existing to be removed or replaced, so it can engage with refurbishment as well. It automatically, instantaneously calculates every decision you make. So you make any temperature change, any dimensional change, anything you like, it will automatically recalculate all the way through. And so it's things like performance, qualities, regulations, hours of use, fuel choice, temperatures, all of those things get recalculated. And so with all of these pieces of information, you can then begin to start doing system-based value engineering instead of that kind of usual dumb individual cost cutting that happens. And so kind of a glimpse at the inner workings. So there's a building model which is based on numbers and text. It's based on performance. It looks at cost and value. It looks at energy and carbon. It looks at products. It gives you the opportunity to choose your U values, your condensation, check your condensation and your decrement. Decrement's to do with overheating, which until it's regulated, it's going to be ignored and it will continue to be our major bugbear. And then bills of materials, bills of products and assemblies, bills of labour, bills of quantities, and we can start getting prices very robustly. Embodied and in-use energy are all calculated. Embodied and in-use carbon are all calculated. And then in addition to the products, we've got generic materials if we haven't got a product to suit, or we've got assemblies. And in the long term, it will be whole elemental assemblies that are accredited through manufacturers having them tested and the like. Choosing your regulations, whether you're using regs, design standards or campaign standards, the value engineering opportunities arise, cost planning tool, and the cost planning tool, it has a bill of quantities, and therefore you can do tendering within the calculator as well. Once you've got all this data, you can then start working out your carbon back periods as well as your payback periods. Payback periods are kind of irrelevant in a way, but everyone uses them, don't they? So carbon back periods are much more interesting. And then data from manufacturers, suppliers, installers, so that we've got all of the different cost components. And then 29 proposed developments of this calculator from now onwards will make this a much more useful tool for anybody in the design professions and anyone who's involved in cost planning, value engineering, etc. But also for self-builders and the like. And the final poster, and oh, I've overrun 6 minutes, so I better stop. Thank you very much.
Not to worry. Thank you very much for that, Brian. Right. Okay, folks. So we are going to move on now to Slido. So the first question is up and active. This is your test question to all get to grips with Slido. If you've still not scanned the QR code, it's on the left-hand side for you. If you don't want to scan the QR code, you can just go to slido.com and use the hashtag TBIM 2021 and it will take you to our question. And we have some votes in already. Please don't be shy, folks. Okay. It's always the way. As soon as you say okay, that's the moment everybody decides to put their final votes in. It's like playing brinkmanship on this or whatever. Right. Okay. So a good spread. We understand kind of where everybody's at. And that will help our panel to understand when they look at the next questions coming through. Right, I'm going to move on now then to our first poll, which is from Lee. And Lee, would you like to quickly explain your question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Duncan. So yeah, my first question is just to get an idea of people's understanding of CO2. So how big is a ton of CO2?
So you can pick one of these options. Any more for any more? Okay, right. And now, if we've worked the Slido technology right, I've tried a new function in Slido this time. We have show correct answer. It works. What do we think to that then, Lee?
As I expected. Yeah, interesting.
Very good. Right, I am going to move on to Brian's first question, and this may get us a bit more of a discussion going. So, Bryan, would you like to jump online and explain a little bit about your question while people are voting, perhaps, or before they vote?
Yeah, I can't find my plug getting back into the. Oh, it might be here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Oh, you
loud and
can.
clear.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Okay, I thought I was trying to find the mic. Okay, so generally, there's a lot of databases out there that we're familiar with, and most of them don't have a green flavour, and some have a no green filters, and some green filters don't work very well. So I'm wondering, where else do you get your information about your products? Whether you, and how do you choose your products? So is it on not on a red list or a black list? Are you using your LCA and EPD data to decide that this is a green product, whether it's embodied energy, embodied carbon data sets, whether you're just choosing materials because of their K or R values, or other green data, green labels? And if you are using other sources, it'd be very interesting to know what those are.
Okay, so we look like we've just about got to an answer. So interesting to see the audience we have, perhaps. But and again, a lot of choices there. What would you draw from that? And I'll put the other two, Lee and Johanna, on notice that we're going to be asking you about this question as well. So.
Okay, well, I mean, it's a bit scary that people don't choose green materials. But I suppose
well,
that's the nature of the
hopefully
business.
they're just saying they don't actually in their role choose materials rather than they don't choose green materials.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Okay, so in that case, if we ignore the top row, LCA and EPD, what people don't perhaps understand is that LCA and EPD doesn't necessarily mean it's a green product. It just means that it's had its greenness or violetness analysed and numbers put against it. So that's potentially a problem. Better to have kind of dived into, have a look at embodied energy, embodied carbon, perhaps embodied carbon more so these days, because that's what we've got to focus on. So that's encouraging. Not on red and black lists, good. In-use energy, in-use carbon, so that's really down to your kind of K values and U values, I think. And then green data and green labels. So some people are using quite a lot of the resources, so that's kind of encouraging.
Yeah.
Don't think I can get to the bottom of this screen, but maybe I've got to the bottom of it. Yeah.
That's the bottom of all the ones that were chosen. If there was
I
something
see.
that doesn't have an option, then it didn't appear as a vote.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, I've learned a lesson. Ask your questions better in order to get the kind of.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Johanna, for somebody involved in the industry that's producing tools to do LCA, what would you take as an answer or thoughts from this question that Bryan's posed?
I'm not surprised even that top was that people just don't look EPD, so LCA is a tool. This is quite a common answer when I ask, do you know what EPD is?
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised if that even didn't mean that they don't specify materials.
Yeah, okay. So there's still quite a lot of work to be done. So I suppose bringing you back in then, Lee, is this sort of these areas that you within Curtins are looking at to sort of get a better knowledge of all these sorts of areas for your staff?
Yeah, exactly. This is kind of what we've been trying to do within the business, is bring awareness to around these conversations, because I think a lot of it has never been done or talked about before. So yeah, it's what needs to happen with the entire industry.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be some people quiet and with sort of no disrespect to anybody who will be going, okay, I don't even know what some of these things are.
Yeah.
That sort of the whole industry needs to have a much bigger and wider conversation about some of the areas. But no, that's really good. Thank you very much. So we move on now to Johanna's first question, which should be coming up now. Yes. So if you want to talk through this one, Johanna, and people can start voting as they see fit.
Yeah, just to get a feel from this audience why they are not doing any kind of calculations, and is it lack of time is quite often blamed, especially in a busy design world. But
yeah,
is that the feel that everyone else feels, or is it something else? We will see.
it's slowly
knowledge
crawling up.
Yep, I would assume that would be the answer that I have in mind too. That lack of knowledge how is quite often the largest issue or barrier to people even start trying it. Like, I mean, there is hundreds of tools available, free and paid, Excel based, BIM based. Something like obviously one-click LCS will be more advanced, but like as a designer, you could do in Curtins, like there's 4 materials, you could do some calculations quite quickly. So I think the lack of knowledge it's probably the biggest barrier.
Yeah,
I have also observed.
Right. Okay. Bryan, does that sort of echo your experience as well?
Yes, I think so. Most people don't know the first thing about it, and I mean, I teach it at university, but it's like a one lecture in a 7-year course. I mean, it's just never enough. And I think time is a fundamental problem. I mean, looking at some of the recent launches of the software that some of the institutions have been putting together, when you've got to build a whole building, it takes an enormous amount of time. I mean, if the building's already built and all you've got to do is choose the materials, it makes life a whole lot easier. Yeah, I can believe all of the other ones as they are.
Okay. And Lee, in terms of sort of lack of knowledge, is that, I suppose, again, were you finding that you're building it up across the business, or specific areas you need to look at?
Yeah, we're definitely building it up. We definitely have got traction within the business now in terms of people talking about carbon and having a better understanding of it. I think we still got a long way to go. From my experience with tools available on the market and things, one of our decisions to develop our own was just generally down to cost and trying to saturate our market internally in terms of getting it out there to people. It was easier for us to develop our own tool in-house because we had the skill sets to do that.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. Thank you very much. Okay, which actually leads us now, Lee, on to your second question, which I'll let you explain.
Yes, so it's just getting to people to think about how much carbon there is in a physical object. So think about what is important. How much more carbon is there in a burger compared to a plastic bag? So we're thinking about the production of these elements. Yes, I'll let you go.
Okay. As always, you say, look, I think we finished, and then more votes come in. No, I think we've got there. Right. So again, with your question, we have the correct answer. And everybody's done quite well this time. How do you take that then in terms of actually applying that to construction materials then within the business? Put you on the spot, Lee.
Yeah, you have that, Duncan.
Organic materials are not always better.
No, that's very true. Do you want to jump in then, Johanna, and
Depends how it's calculated. If you take everything, how you water trees into account, then I think timber might be also in the higher category of carbon than steel, but that's not how you calculate it.
Yeah, interesting.
I mean, land use and everything, it might change the parameters of calculations are quite important here, I think.
Yes, absolutely right. Bryan, again, is there sort of elements that you find that either people don't know about or are surprised about when they're doing sort of green building calculations?
Yes, I think it's always surprising, and you know, things like if you just take a light fitting, the old lamp bulb had a very kind of low environmental impact to make it, but it consumed vast amounts of energy and wasted so much. And then when you show them a brand new fancy light fitting, which is made of so much aluminium and loads of control mechanisms, they may save energy, but they don't have to use some to make themselves. So these things do come as a surprise to people. But I expected this was going to be 2,500 times, and sort of pleasantly surprised that it's not that bad. But what it reminds me of is that we produce so much plastic packaging, and maybe it's not as bad as you might imagine. I'd like to see a comparison between paper and cardboard packaging and plastics, because I think there are some interesting things to learn from that you won't expect.
Yes, you do sometimes come across these sort of counterintuitive bits where actually something isn't quite as bad as you thought it was, and perhaps in the overall scheme of things, we just carry on doing it for now. Yeah, interesting. Okay, well, thank you very much for that question, Lee. That's certainly raised some interesting discussions. And we move on now to Bryan's second question, which I fear you can't see all the options on my computer screen, but you'll have all the options available in the actual Slido page.
Yes.
So if you want to talk through.
Yeah, so I mean, at the moment, there are a number of ways of doing the calculations. Either you're not doing it at all, or you're using something. And I know plenty of people are using BIM consultants who sit in the corner of the room whilst you're all sitting around the table discussing things, and they're tapping away in their computer, and they'll give you the thumbs up. Well done, chaps, 86%. But you don't know the first thing about how he got that figure. So I'm intrigued to know just how much people kind of delve into this and find and where they find their information. BRE Green Guide, it's so limited. I mean, when BRE Green Guide first came out, we bought the book, we went through it, and we put it in the bin because it had nothing to do with what we were doing in the office. And although it has 1,600 methods of assembly, it isn't necessarily giving you what you want to do. So you need to have the tools yourself to do your own calculations, or you need to be able to do some iteration or something, I don't know. And then some will be using LCA tools. Some will have developed their own calculator. I'm developing the design and decision tool because it's much a broader approach. And there may be other things. So anything that you're doing yourselves, let us know about it in the kind of last cell.
Okay, so it does seem at the moment as though lots of organisations, I hate to use the word default, but are using a BRIAM consultant. Interestingly, that we don't has come in second, but I'm going to again give the audience that we have the benefit of the doubt rather than necessarily being involved in that.
Right.
But interesting to see.
Yeah, it's interesting that quite a number of people are developing their own spreadsheets or own calculators. So that's encouraging.
Yeah. Not calculating the embodied carbon is not answer for every problem, but it's
no. Okay. So is that, sorry, just picking up on your point then, Johanna, that people are doing, I'm going to say, their bit of carbon or their bit of sustainability, so to speak, and so they're calculating it using Excel rather than perhaps doing life cycle carbon assessments or other tools or whatever, do you think?
Well, when I started 3 years ago, I was a BREEAM assessor, and we did a lot of the LCAs using the LCA tools. So indirectly, if you use a BREEAM consultant, they probably use LCA tool because that's their tool to do so. And they were probably our major users. But now I've noticed that a lot more architects and structural engineers are a lot more interested in doing their own work before they even have a BREEAM consultant abroad. Because it's kind of, once you've done your design, once you have gone through planning, you're not going to change anything too drastic anymore. It should have happened a lot before that.
Yeah.
And again, so it seems like a good point there to bring you back in, Lee, and sort of as structural engineers, are you sort of again finding that you're being brought in to think about carbon much earlier in the process than you were previously, perhaps?
Yeah, definitely. Right at the early stages of the project, we've already been asked to start considering carbon. One of the reasons why we had the simple kind of spreadsheet we built in-house, just to save time and efficiency before the even models were ever built.
Okay, so is that working on just sort of volumes or just sort of an indicative square meterage or something then that was trying to give a customer an idea of the carbon?
Exactly, yeah, just in indicative kind of square footage from potential sketches and schemes that we have initially.
Yeah.
Can I just add another thing? Having been involved in a number of BREEAM projects where the client either decided, oh, we won't bother to do BREEAM then because we can do better without it. And also, I spent one whole project doing hours and hours and hours of number crunching areas of external envelope, floors, finishes, etc., only to record how badly we did. Didn't change anything, didn't make us stop and think, oh, we could do something better. It was already far too far down the project to kind of make changes. So very frustrating.
Yeah, I think that is another thing that the industry has got to get to grips with, and those first early engagement consultants or clients themselves need to be better informed to be thinking about carbon right from the very start, rather than suddenly, okay, I've got planning, now does it comply?
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be really thought about with the cost once you start building it.
Yes.
What's the cost and carbon, and then
yeah,
together. It's like anything. If you're going to try to change something end of construction project, it's going to cost you more. So it's kind of works similar ways.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, we'll go to our last poll of the afternoon, which is back to you, Johanna, and your final question.
Yes, there is a Climate Change Act, which is coming to force, and we all should be net zero carbon by 2050, whole UK. Were you aware of it? And if so, what do you think what do you need to do? And is it clear what you meant to be doing?
Yeah.
I was hoping that everyone knows what the legislation is.
You've got the theme for your next webinar.
Yeah, there it is.
Or series of webinars, as they no doubt tweak, change, reassess, whatever.
Yeah, UK was the first country to put Climate Change Act to be net zero carbon 2050. Now you know.
Yeah.
Not sure how we get there. There is no like a guidelines or roadmap being developed, but not yet. Knowledge.
We'll get something, I'm sure. Interesting, again, just for the audience's views, when Johanna prepared this question, the what legislation option wasn't actually on. She was far more optimistic, and I said, I think we need to put that in. And I'm pleased to see that actually it didn't end up being the largest, and that there are people who are obviously considering it in our audience today. So hopefully you'll take some comfort from this poll, Johanna.
Yeah, I think that's good. It's better than half that know something about it and knows about it. So yeah, that's nearly, what's that? 70%, 25%.
So Lee, do you think in terms of where Curtins are, is that sort of you're sort of sitting, tracking, thinking about this journey to net zero?
I believe our sustainability director, Stephen Beggs, has been involved in looking in towards this. I must admit, I don't know myself that that was what I clicked on that one.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my answer to that one, I'm afraid.
No, that's fine. Again, I think it just sort of reflects as a bit, just echoing what Johanna said, that it is easy to be overwhelmed with the amount of change, reports, standards, legislation that comes into the industry or just in everyday life, that these things, sometimes quite big, can pass us by. Bryan, what would you sort of take from this?
Well,
that we've got?
Okay, every event I spoke at live events, I would always ask, and the person that's just presented to you about this legislation or this publication from the government, how many of you in the audience have seen or heard of it? And there's one hand comes up, and it's the librarian. It's not the business managers, it's the librarians. So the industry is never aware, and it's only through manufacturers associations and institutions developing the tools and developing the calculators and the data sets that the industry ever gets there. So I'm not surprised by this. And you know, some of it through regulation perhaps, or maybe the ACAN campaign or LETI or RBA campaign. So people are beginning to hear about it slowly.
Yeah.
But there's so much more to it than just the legislation. It's how do you apply it?
Yeah, absolutely. As echoing Johanna's point of view, it's easy to just come up with a very fantastic high-level guideline of right, net zero by 2050, but does that mean that you're nowhere near it in 2049 and you suddenly do it all in the last year, or you've got to start now and do massive changes and small iterations as you reach 2050? Yeah, that journey and the roadmap is somewhat lacking.
And I think every building we build today will be still standing to 2050. So
yeah,
absolutely, yes. That echoes again conversations that you hear when people are talking about digital twins, with the fact that actually we build, I think it's less than 5%, possibly even less than 1% of our whole building stock each year, and that actually everything is the existing, and that we're going to have to learn to work with what we've got rather than just keep knocking down and building new.
There is another issue about setting standards which have a progression over time. We really should go straight off from the beginning at 100% improvement. Otherwise, we're going to have so many new properties to be refurbished.
Yes. Well, thank you very much to our panel. Thank you, Johanna. Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Bryan, for your interesting questions.